This week on The Futurists, Mark Pesce.
We're now starting to see at the level of the single individual what they're calling ChatGPT psychosis.
Okay, hey there. Welcome back to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tercek, and this week I am solo hosting the show as my partner Brett King is traveling around the world doing future things. And, I have an opportunity this week to interview a longtime friend and one of our very first guests on the show, Mark Pesce, who is also a world traveler and a well-known futurist based in Australia, American by origin, someone I've known for about 30 years, which is a little bit disturbing when you think about that length of time. But he's been very, very much at the forefront, or I should say the coal face, grinding away at the future. And so as he's passing through Los Angeles on his way here from Sydney, I thought he'd stop in and do a show. So hi, Mark. Great to have you back on The Futurist. Welcome back.
Thank you, Robert. And it's wonderful to be back on what is a really, really great show.
Oh, gosh, thank you. That kind of buttering up and flattery will get you everywhere on this show. We'll have you back again soon. One of the reasons Brett's been so busy is he's setting up our first conference live event in Dubai. And that's coming in September on the 22nd and 23rd in Dubai at the fabulous Jumeirah Beach Hotel. We're having a gathering. We're convening a gathering of futurists and future-minded people, all made possible by the generosity and support of MasterCard and other sponsors. So hopefully we'll be doing that more in the future. And someday, who knows, maybe we'll bring the show to Sydney. In the meantime, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing? Because, gosh, it's been a while. I think I spoke to you at least a year ago. But tell us what you've been up to in Sydney and what the future looks like from down under.
So it's really interesting. I think probably about the last time we talked, Robert, I was in the early stages of setting up a business that was going to be an AI consultancy. And we started, it's called Wisely AI, because the tagline is that we help organizations use AI safely and wisely. The joke here is that in our first year, we had lots of clients who were kind of dipping their toe into the water. What do we need to do? Or perhaps the board had come to them with their hair on fire, screaming, "Oh my God, we have to have an AI strategy." There was a lot of that because of the amount of hype that was going on. And we would sit them down and perhaps calm them down and talk to them about what their needs actually were, and then explain what was possible, what might be possible sometime in the future, and what you needed to think about in terms of managing the risks. And we very, it's both embarrassing and pleasing to say that we managed to scare a lot of those firms away from using AI right now.
Okay, great. You're not really selling in the way that one would hope, but you're probably doing a good service. Tell me about
We're
that.
not, we're right. And we're not selling the hype because you can't fulfill those expectations. What we can say is, here's the things it's really good at. It's really good at summarizing things. It's really good at classifying things. It can be good at composing things, but you have to watch that like a hawk. Right. And if you can fit your needs into those three categories, we can certainly do things with you. Can you automate full business processes? Probably not much yet. That was still really early days, but it was really interesting to sort of see how that hype was converting into a need to do something. And, we worked with firms like, oh, well, we're going to roll out Copilot across the entire organization. And we'd be like, okay, that's great. What are you using it for? And
Yeah.
they wouldn't well, we're talking to you about that. Well, okay, what about your business? And the thing that we learned very quickly is that people thought AI was a bit of a magic wand. And the first thing we had to do, and I think this is why they didn't come back, is we snapped the magic wand for them. We're like, it's not a magic wand. If you're going to get business process automation, you're going to have to understand your business process really well before you can start to apply AI to bits of it to get. And really, this is where we are in the AI world. You hear, oh my God, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Most what we're getting is people using a little bit of AI to get 5 or 10% on a business process, which is, that's fine. It's early days. You're not really talking about getting 100 or 200 or, the 10x, 20x that we're talking
Right,
about.
or the one person corporation, or where you can like downsize your entire back office or something. We hear these stories, and my experience has been the same. Just to recap some of the points you just made,
Yeah.
if you're serious about applying AI to your business process, you have to start with an understanding of your business process.
Yes.
And for an individual or somebody who's self-employed or for an executive, that means you have to start with you and you have to get really clear and conscious about what you actually do in a given day. And most people aren't. I would say most people snap into trance. They get in front of their computer, they start their workday, and they're reacting to incoming things.
Yeah.
Now, can AI help with that? Like, can AI help people monitor their process?
Okay. I guess the answer is theoretically, right? But we haven't seen a lot of good tools on that yet, right? It's
Hmm.
right now what we're seeing is mostly tools for tool makers. So, you talk about people getting very productive. Right now, that's happening largely with people who are using programming tools. And there's, of course, this new phrase that's going around called vibe coding,
Yeah.
which is where a single person who may or may not know how to code sits down and directs enough prompts to a powerful enough language model, a frontier model like Gemini or Claude or one of the later OpenAI models, and basically gets it to build all of the code around a specification which is not particularly technical, but is more like, I wanted to do this thing and I wanted to do that thing. A really good example of this, which is current to the moment, we know about Coldplay Gate because that's the big thing where that executive and girlfriend slash CPO were trapped on the camera at the kiss cam at a Coldplay concert. Well, that video went up and got 100 million views or something on TikTok, went viral, and then this guy who didn't know how to program made a little game that's web based out of it, vibe coding, and created an NFT for it. Again, using one of the NFT protocols, all doing vibe coding, and he did it over the course of a weekend, right? And this is
Okay,
someone who
so
became,
for a gag or a stunt or a social media meme, it might be sufficient for that. But I've heard mixed things about the results. If you're using Cursor or Windsurf, that you might get very unreliable code or code that doesn't scale or code that can break or might have massive security vulnerabilities, particularly if you don't know what you're
yes,
doing,
yes.
So if you're a skilled coder, you can debug it. But if you're not a skilled or experienced coder, you might be actually creating a new set of problems downstream.
Here's the thing, though, Rob. If you get it to spit out a bunch of code and you're an experienced coder, you will spend longer learning how that code is working in order to understand whether there are security vulnerabilities in it than you would have if you've done the code from a plain sheet of paper. And this is what we're starting to understand now is sure, a computer can gin up a lot of code. Is it going to be good enough code? Maybe. Do you want to maintain good enough code? Probably not. Do you want to stick just good enough code into your very secure code base? Absolutely not. Right. So
So, in
there's a
other
whole set
words,
of,
then the
yeah.
productivity myth, the great promise of AI is that it's going to accelerate productivity. But what you're saying is even in software development, writing code, which is meant to be the very first bastion of AI automation, even there, you're seeing that actually it's not necessarily adding at all to productivity. It might be subtracting productivity.
So there was a paper that was released 2 weeks ago that took a look at, I think, 100 open source programmers who were using, I believe, Cursor. They all believed they were being more productive, but in fact, their productivity had slowed by 20%.
Yep, I saw that
And that was,
report. So
yeah,
that's a
that was
that's
across all of them. It wasn't located into a single project or a single person or a single style of coding.
the interesting thing there is that people can delude themselves into the illusion that they are somehow being more productive. Okay, so you're going to client companies and they're asking
Yes,
you for your advice and maybe some expertise on implementation. And
yes.
your first message is study your process, and your second message is saying, exactly how do you expect to be more productive here? Because you might not necessarily achieve that using this particular set of tools. Now, Mark, that seems to fly in the face of all the hype we are getting and have been getting for the past 4 years from Silicon Valley. And the whole industry has poured billions of dollars into artificial intelligence infrastructure, software, and let's not kid ourselves, marketing, right? There, the message seems to be adopt AI or die. And they're really framing it in these dire terms. Um, Now, on the one hand, that might be good for your business because it's certainly stirring up a lot of interest. People are feeling like they got to deal with it. But on the other hand, how does that affect your clients when you talk to folks about this? Are they thinking rationally about this, or have they been terrorized into AI?
I've had a couple of clients come to me and say, "Oh my God, we have to get ahead of our competitors," because they had this weird idea that their competitors were all far more advanced in AI. And I'm like, No, I know your competitors, they're not even thinking about AI yet. So
Mm,
I think in some sense, we've lost the idea, which is, I think, a very good idea when it comes to AI. Make haste slowly. It's like,
mm,
yes, absolutely. As the tools are useful enough to your business, then you should be adopting them and you should have a strategy that allows you to be open to see and experiment and play with those tools. But just trying to adopt them because you have to adopt them because you think you're going to suddenly be left behind is not going to be useful for you. Let me give you a little example. So I was working with a financial services company that was actually US based.
mm.
And what they wanted is because they were doing underwriting, and underwriting means you have to read all of these documents and sort of find the important bits that allow you to assess risk when you're making a loan, right? And there's a lot of documents there, and a human being can miss important information. And that can be very expensive when that happens because they miscalculate risk. So, could we use AI tools to help pull out things? In other words, to make the underwriter better at what they do? Now, the return on investment on that is a little weird because essentially what you're saying is that fewer investments are going to fail, right? And that will take time to prove. But the first thing was, can we actually make them better at what they do? And the short answer is after we tested a number of tools, because you can't just pick the first tool up off the shelf. You have to actually go, what is it you really need to do here? Okay, now that we have that, now let's try a range of tools. Copilot didn't work. Gemini did. Notebook LM, which is my favorite tool. Everyone, by the way, right now, whether you're working or not, you should be having a play with Notebook LM, which is Google's amazing tool that you can stuff documents into it, lots of documents, ask questions. It will create a podcast for you
Yeah,
based on
that's
your
great. It's
deep dive.
basically automating me out of the Futurist podcast here. You can generate your own.
It's it's different, but it's quite fun, and I think it gives people a sense of, okay, how can I use this tool well? And it turned out that was pretty much the right tool for them to be able to use as underwriters. And so there's no reason to believe that there won't be a lot of business underwriters using tools very similar to Notebook LM in the near future, not to put themselves out of business, but to really help them be better at what they do.
Okay, so you're making a really important distinction. I just want to underscore it. And what you're saying is that in the right set of hands, with someone who does understand their business process and has a pretty good understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, and who has evaluated the variety of tools that are available and has come to kind of a, let's say, a conscious decision about which tool they're going to select. They're not just randomly picking up a tool. If all those things are true, then that person might become more productive, but
Yes.
they're not being automated out of a job. Like, let's get real about that. You're making a worker more productive. That's definitely a positive. The reason I'm going at such length to tease this out is that we've had a number of guests on the show recently
Mm.
who are repeating this kind of AI doomer mantra, which is that we're all going to lose our jobs. And candidly, the leaders of some of the biggest AI companies, including ChatGPT, or sorry, OpenAI and Anthropic, they've been out there saying this, kind of banging this drum of AI doom for quite some time. And it's working. It is creating a kind of panic wave where people are reacting and they're feeling like they have to do something in desperation. Now, this is very good marketing for AI companies, but I don't know if it's actually,
Temporarily.
I'm not sure if it's really valid, and I haven't seen any evidence of it. There are certainly some jobs that are going to get reduced. There'll be less need for them as people get more efficient. But the point I'm trying to make here is that in the hands of the right person, this is like a superpower. It enables you to get more done faster. It also makes you more conscious of your business process. I actually puts you on top of your business process, like managing yourself, I suppose, if you're using AI. And these all seem like like positives without the doomer message. You can actually adopt AI without responding to this fear that everyone's going to lose their job. How do you feel about that? Does that mesh with your experience?
The answer to that is absolutely yes, and I think that there's a probably a fundamental misperception that's lying at a lot of this. So very early on, sort of, you get ChatGPT at the end of 2022. In sort of early 2023, you get the OpenAI's API, so that you could build it into computer programs. And people started to build what they called agents, autonomous agents. So, you
Mhm.
give it a goal, it works out from the goal what it needs to do, it decomposes that into a series of actions, it then goes and does those actions. And there was some really fun very playful examples of how that would work. And people went, oh my gosh, this is really great. This is full AI. This is, you and I are old enough to remember the Knowledge Navigator from Apple, right? Which
Hmm.
was the first example of what an agent could be.
Thanks for reminding the audience that we're old.
Exactly.
It's okay.
But
We've got experience, and that apparently
yeah,
is very valuable in the age of AI.
and it was, but I spoke to a researcher sort of 6 months into modern AI who said we spent 10 years in our research lab in Germany trying to make these happen, and we didn't have good enough AI, and maybe there's good enough AI now. Turns out you can't say it's good enough and you can't say it's bad enough. And what I want to do is give you a sense of the statistics here. Toby Ord, who's a researcher at Oxford University, just wrote a brilliant paper about this. He says, look, you can get an agent to do a thing for you, and even the best agents in perfect conditions will get that right about 95% of the time. But the thing is, an agent doesn't just do one thing. It's taking a goal and decomposing it into a whole set of tasks. So it will go from one task that it thinks it's completed successfully to the next task and so on and so forth. It'll chain the tasks together. And every time you're doing that, you've got a 95% best case, 95% success rate. You
So
don't
that
get very
5% failure rate is accumulating then. This is compounding.
It's compounding, exactly. And it
Oh
doesn't
boy.
take very long in that chain until you simply don't have a reliable process. Now, the way people deal with this right now is that effectively they have to check the output of the computer at every step along the way. So it's doing the tasks, but it requires human oversight. And if that task is a highly expert task, it requires highly expert oversight.
Hmm.
So any of the savings in either time or efficiency, in other words, personal labor costs, are being eaten up by the amount of oversight. Will that 95% go to 96%, 97%? Sure. That means the chain gets slightly longer. Does it get long enough that we can turn our eyes away and just go, oh, that's sorted? No one is seeing that yet. And yet, all of the prognostication about us being thrown out of work relies on that. And that's where I feel like that foundation for people making these statements like this isn't solid. That foundation's built on sand.
Yeah, I hear you, and I sense that myself. I find AI chatbots in particular will give you a very plausible sounding response. And even if you ask them for a highly technical question or an answer that requires deep expertise, they can come back with something that on the surface looks really plausible. In fact, the more arcane the subject, the more plausible it seems if you don't know what you're looking at. And yet, and that can fool you, right? You can feel like you're getting an excellent result, but I think it's more the simulation of an excellent result. And this is Mark, this is weird in our society. We seem to be moving into this zone where simulation is way more important than reality. And we see this certainly in politics and in media and in journalism in the United States, probably elsewhere. This idea that, like, the story is what matters, or the reality show of politics is what matters rather than the actual
The
policies.
vibe.
Yeah, well, that's it. So back to vibe coding, we
Yeah.
seem to have vibe media and vibe politics and everything else, which to me really is just intellectual laziness. These are people who are undisciplined thinkers accepting a mediocre result that's dressed up and looks like a plausible result, and that is certainly true of a lot of the output that you see from AI. Now, in the hands of someone who's skilled or knowledgeable, they can redirect it. I often challenge ChatGPT or Claude to go back and reconsider. And often, they're very polite. They'll say, "Oh yeah, it's absolutely excellent point," and then they revise the response. But that doesn't increase my confidence. That makes me drill harder because now I'm like, okay, now that I've found the soft underbelly, I'm going to keep drilling and drilling and drilling until I get to bedrock. And sometimes you never really do get to bedrock. This is a cause of concern, right? Because so many companies now seem to be focused on this model of downsizing and replacing human workers with artificial intelligence when it's not proven that the AI is reliable, but also it seems like the AI requires senior, seasoned human experts to manage it. Am I getting it wrong? Like, am I missing something here?
I think that is exactly right. And I think that we haven't had a penny drop moment. I want to point out, and this again is something that's surfacing now. There are a lot of layoffs happening in tech right now. So you see
Yeah.
Meta laying off, Google's laying off,
Yeah,
Microsoft's laying
people use that as like
off.
correlation for this theory.
But the truth of the matter is, those people aren't being replaced by AI. Those people are being cut because the capex expenses of building these massive data centers, which I think we're currently building north of $500 billion a year in data centers. And I mean north, right? To support AI. And so Microsoft's cutting operating expenses so that they can have the capital to be able to do this. Ditto Google, ditto Meta. So I
So it's
think
not really true that those workers are being replaced by AI, that they can have fewer developers and coders and they can replace those people with AI.
despite the fact that Satya Nadella said 30% of Microsoft's code commits are AI now, which everyone went, oh my God, now I trust Microsoft code a lot less.
Yeah, this from the company that's been spectacularly hacked a lot in the
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
6 months, so much so that Satya Nadella's bonus, his bonus got cut in half.
Yeah. So I don't think that's happened. The thing that we did see is that there are, rather outside of tech, but in media, in marketing, copywriters have been fired en masse, right? That
Mhm.
the kind of copy that you can get for a blurb from ChatGPT is good enough that you can let your copywriters go or use them a lot less than you used to. And I think that there's still room for a certain class of copywriter that is extremely high that can add the final polish that you're not going to get. But in many situations for basic marketing copy and things like that, you simply don't need copywriters anymore because the machine will do. And this is really what we're talking about. Mediocre, to put that word back into play again. Mediocre content, but this is a mediocre situation, so people are going to be happy with this. My fear is that we're going to kind of all descend into a mediocre civilization because we all got so lazy that we forgot that we could actually have anything higher quality than that.
Well, that reminds me of the conversation we were just having yesterday, which is an entire generation of students now is being conditioned to the fact that they can turn to a chatbot, an AI chatbot, to write their papers, their term papers. And this starts in grade school, it goes all the way through high school and now in college. And there's been plenty of reports, at least here in this country, about college students who are just phoning it in. You know, they get an assignment from the professor, they go to ChatGPT, they dump the assignment in, they get a paper back out, some sort of paper. They don't even read it, and they hand that in. And the evidence of this is quite clear because in the papers that are submitted, professors are saying things that say like, "Well, I'm just a chatbot, so I can't really answer that definitively." So clear evidence that the person not only did they not read the assignment, they also didn't read their response to the assignment. They're just phoning it in. Now, this raises all sorts of interesting questions, right? So you go, well, students are going through the motions of college for what? The diploma? Why don't we just sell the diploma and spare them the time and cost and effort? What are professors really doing about this? And what kind of assignments are professors giving students if they could be automated? You know, this starts to open up the questions about the value of higher education and our education system. But it also suggests to me that there's a group of students now who are becoming dependent on AI. You know, that we're sort of fostering a dependency. And if I were running OpenAI or Claude, or Anthropic, I guess I would be very excited about this prospect that you're going to have a whole generation of people who are crippled in the sense that they can't do the critical thinking and they can't organize their thoughts well enough to write a research paper, which is going to leave them very, very ill-equipped for a business career that requires independent judgment and the ability to articulate abstract concepts. What's your take on that? Is that where we're going to see the mass displacement of workers? Is it just a bunch of undertrained or undereducated students being produced by factory colleges who don't really have the critical thinking skills? Is that the future scenario we should be concerned about?
I mean, there is so I don't even quite even know where to start. I need to get a shovel and start just like diving in here because you bring up a whole bunch of stuff because you're talking about education, you're talking about people growing up. I'm going to start to throw just some data points at you. It's been reported broadly that people in their early 20s are all kind of using ChatGPT as a therapy agent now,
Hmm.
right? Which
Yeah,
is also really
that's going
weird
to do
for
wonders for human relationships. I can already see
well,
it.
and we already know because they have high degrees of sycophancy that they're very agreeable. That's actually not necessarily that you actually need a therapist who's going to be honest with you, and you're not going to get that from ChatGPT. So there's some of that. There's the wonderful paper "This Is Your Brain" on ChatGPT that was published by the Media Lab about a month ago, which talks about the fact that when you learn a task, if you put ChatGPT and the primacy of that task when you're learning the task, the brain connections, because they were doing essentially functional EEGs when they were watching people doing this. The brain connections that are being made, if you're using ChatGPT as the primary element in the task, are nowhere near as profound or as useful or as transferable as when someone's had to learn it effectively on their own, right?
Which
So,
makes sense, right? It's like if you use training wheels, you're never going to really learn how to ride a bike. And if you're using an AI as a training wheels for writing a paper, you're probably never going to learn how to write a paper properly as well.
and one of the things that maybe we don't like to admit, but is inarguably true, learning is painful.
Yeah, it is. It's true.
That's just the deal. And
Yeah.
the reason it's painful is because your brain's doing all this work going, oh, I got to connect this part to this part. And oh my God, what's going on here?
Store it,
And it,
retrieve it. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
It's true.
And
I experience that when I'm trying to learn a new piece on piano or when I'm trying to learn a new language.
yeah,
It's a fresh reminder of just how hard it is. And when you're in school, though, you're meant to be kind of in fighting condition, like in peak mental prowess, so that you
yeah.
can handle the task of ongoing learning. And I fear that that muscle might not be getting developed, or it's being underdeveloped with the crutch of AI.
And, it's hard to know. I want to point back that all of us learned long division in primary school, and none of us do long division anymore because calculators do it for us, right? I
Yep.
mean, we can do it. But there are bits of this that look like that, but it does feel larger right now
Hmm.
because no one really gave that much thought to the fact that people had kind of stopped doing long division. And it's like, yeah, whatever. I think
Okay,
that
we
if
hear
people
that
stop being,
analogy. I don't mean to barge in, but like we hear that analogy. People say,
yeah,
"Well, gosh, when you were in school, the Hewlett Packard calculator came out, and they were banned from classrooms because students had to learn how to do
yes,
trigonometry or whatever." Um,
yes,
yes, and yet we learned it, and like you said, we
yeah,
occasionally turn to it, and sometimes we're totally dependent on it. It's true. I use the calculator on my computer to do long division because why should I exert the effort to do that?
yeah.
Do you think this is the same thing? Is ChatGPT just the pocket calculator of the 21st century?
I think it is far too early to be able to make a read on that yet. That's the thing. I mean, that's just part of it.
Oh, oh
But, I mean,
gosh.
no, it's
Too
it's not.
soon to say. It's a show
It's
called The Futurists, for Christ's sake. Come on.
but it's the, I want to be very careful before I rule anything in and out because I think what we're seeing around the weakening of cognitive skills is clearly true,
Yeah.
or it's clearly observable, and so that's a warning. And is that around the tool? Is it around the way that we're using the tool? Right. And I think it's probably more around the way that we're using the tool than the tool itself. And that's why when I'm saying it's early days, it's because I don't think we've got any really good sense about the best ways to use this tool. And so people are using it in ways that are probably not helpful to them.
Let me offer this observation. So as chatbots begin to erode our dependency on search to retrieve information, and as newspapers rely increasingly on artificial intelligence to substitute for human journalists, these are two things that are happening right now.
Yeah.
My fear is that the person on the receiving end is getting plausible seeming information that might be false, and in some cases will be false, but we don't know what percentage that is,
Although,
right?
although point taken, Robert, they were getting that off of search as well.
Yeah, and they were getting it from journalism in the past, right? So sure, you could say all those things are true. I just wonder if we're going to be deluding ourselves into a society that can no longer function. Like this, is this something we should be concerned about? The idea that democracies can only function based on how reliable the information inputs are. You need an informed populace in order to have a functioning democracy. And gosh, at least here in the United States, right now, at this instant in history, it sure seems like we're moving in a direction away from a functioning democracy. Maybe I'm overreacting. Can we attribute some of that fear to AI? Is this the part of AI that we should be worried about?
Yeah, and I mean, look, good information even for a functioning autocracy. Because if the Chinese stopped understanding how all of their machines worked because no one bothered to study, their civilization would grind to a halt too, democracy or not. Knowledge is, in fact, it transcends any question of politics. It is very important to politics, but it actually transcends that. So the idea of epistemology, of being able to know what's true, is being amplified. It's being highlighted right now precisely because of the slop, right?
Okay,
Because a
so
lot of
let's
slop is
pause
there.
right there because I really, really, really want to talk about Grok and Elon Musk, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna resist that temptation because it's time for
Thank
us to
you.
take a little break. And folks, you are listening to the Futurists and Rob Tercek, and I'm talking to Mark Pesce about the hope and the hype. And we'll be right back after this announcement from our sponsors. Hi, this is Rob Tercek from the Futurist podcast, which is part of the Provoked Media Network. I'm excited to tell you about some news. The Futurist is expanding into the real world. We're doing a live event in Dubai. Now, folks who listen to the Futurist podcast, you're going to be familiar with the fact that my co-host Brett King has been working very hard in Dubai and other parts of the Middle East for a long time. And for more than a year, he's been putting together this event. And now, with the help and support of MasterCard and Emirates MBD and many other partners, we are putting together the world's largest futurist meeting in Dubai. It will take place at the fabulous Jumeirah Beach Hotel in Dubai, and it'll be on the September 22nd and 23rd this year. So just a few weeks from now. The speakers are going to include some of the world's leading futurists and forecasters and future thinkers. People like Brian Cox and astronaut Scott Kelly. Of course, Brett and I will be there to conduct interviews and introduce some of the other folks. We've got speakers from around the world. And if you're interested in meeting futurists in person and participating in an event that attracts the future-minded, please join us on the 22nd and 23rd of September. You can learn more about it at futuristevent.com. That's futurist singular event.com. It's all one word, futuristevent.com. And that'll tell you all about the event. I sure hope to see you there in Dubai on the 22nd and 23rd of September. Thanks. Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tercek, and this week I'm talking to Mark Pesce. And we've been sorting through some of the hype, some of the maybe overblown commentary, and some of the related fears that I find personally so disorienting because I'm not quite sure if they're based on reality or marketing hype. Now, Mark, recently, Elon Musk has been making a big deal about having the most honest or the most truthful AI, and all he seems to be achieving, well, aside from massive face plant, all he seems to be achieving is to create some doubt about whether AI can be truthful. Right? He's actually muddying the waters. He hasn't achieved any clarity, and it's starting to raise questions about what do we mean by the truth? Like, what do we mean by consensus reality? So he's injected some doubt. Recently, in the news, there was this spectacular mess where he decided that AI is too woke. Term I dislike intensely, but he decided to correct for that. And what we've seen again and again is that when you correct AI, when you try to manipulate AI in order to get a desirable outcome, what you end up doing is reducing the quality of the product across the board. And that's certainly the case for Grok. So Grok went into this spasm of anti-Semitic babble, pro-Hitler babble. I think they were calling it Mecha Hitler.
It called itself Mecha Hitler. That's how bad it was. So yes.
Not the most shining moment for Elon Musk, a fellow who has actually got a track record of some spectacular face plants. But also broadly, it seems to point to this thing that, like, well, when you train artificial intelligence on the entire corpus of human output, which is what the internet sort of is a proxy for, I think, it's going to arrive at a kind of consensus reality across all of the AIs that seems a little bit left of center, or like kind of center left, I guess is how I describe it in terms of politics. Which, interestingly enough, is where our academics and researchers and scientists tend to be as well. Not all, but on average. And now it might be a reflection of their input, right? That might be one aspect of it. It might be that the people who write a lot in English tend to be center left. That's certainly also a possibility. So, this is like flawed data set that's training the AI. Or it might just be that those folks were closer to consensus reality and objectively measurable truth. And therefore, that's what the AI is responding with, not not the hype and hyperbole that you get these days from the populist right in many nations, not just the United States, but certainly in the United States, it's safe to say that the populist right is enamored of conspiracy theories like QAnon that are demonstrably false, and some plain out falsehoods, some outright falsehoods that they repeat incessantly, even though they've been debunked again and again and again. The AI seemed to be smart enough to steer around that. But recently on last week's show, I spoke to Dan Schwartz, who is an expert in AI search, and he's benchmarking different AI systems for this. And we talked about the fact that AI systems can, if you ask an AI, any of the chatbots, tell me about Pravda network in Russia, it will tell you that it's a disinformation network. It's basically an extension of the Russian government apparatus, and it's there to publish disinformation and disseminate it. But then later, if you ask it a question, particularly about an obscure topic, it might cite the Pravda network as a source. And so there's a disconnect there, right? So the systems are smart enough to know what these sources are, but they don't have the common sense then to sort of discount those bad sources. And so there's a little
Well,
variation there.
the
There's a
input
little
data
gap there.
Yeah, the input data isn't being fed in with the metadata around source, which would allow the machine to be able to, because all the data is basically being treated equally when it's being fed in. Back to your Pravda example, on election day, which we had an election in May in Australia, the ABC had reported that Pravda Australia existed as a website and was publishing essentially propaganda about Australia. And it's like, it's not for readership. It's because they know it's being fed into the LLM. So this is a specific campaign by the Kremlin. God,
Hmm.
what an old term that's come back again, to be able to produce data that will poison the outputs of an LLM that's trained on that data. All right. And
Okay,
so,
so this is
so
another thing to be worried about then, is the idea that malicious actors are out there and they're intentionally polluting the system, polluting the data, to skew the results of the AI. And this obviously is going to be mana for the people who love conspiracy theories, because this is an endless rabbit hole to go down. There's no shortage of people you can accuse of poisoning the data set.
yes, yes. But what it means is that training a language model on everything, which is the current best practice, whether or not that's the best practice is another matter, but that's the current best practice, is going to give you results reflecting the fact that you've trained it on everything,
Yeah.
right? Which, again, maybe that's not the best idea we've ever had. It was an idea, and we've certainly gone down the rabbit hole with it, but the results may not be as great as we thought. I mean, one of the
That brings to mind. I'm going back to. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here with another idea, but it brings to mind a criticism of higher education in the United States is that until about the 1980s, there was an accepted canon of Western thinking and Western writing that was considered to be the core curriculum for a liberal arts education. And of course, then from the 80s onward, that canon was attacked, mostly from people, critics on the left, and the view there is that it was biased in many ways, and that's probably an accurate perspective. But then what was substituted were texts that may or may not be the same quality of thought. They might not even be the same level of validity. I mean, that's certainly debatable, right? In a way, that corpus was poisoned, you could say, for political intent. And the outcome has been this kind of culture war that we're experiencing in the United States, but I think it's happening elsewhere as well. Am I making the wrong analogy here? Am I trying to
Well, I mean,
draw
I
like?
don't know if that's the casus belli of the culture war. Let's just put it that way. I
Hmm.
mean, I think it's reflected in the culture war. I remember when Brown was the first Ivy to do it, essentially said, "Yeah, okay, the dead white men, that's fine. They're part of the canon. But oh, here's the post-structuralists. So here's
Hmm.
Foucault, here's Deleuze and Guattari, here's Paty, and the students who are educated in that, Dana Boyd being one of them, are exceptional, right? And I think there is an argument to be said that diversity is a word that's also not popular right now.
I know. We're
But
sort of we're just uncovering all the issues right now. Let's
yeah,
go ahead,
yeah.
keep going.
But that diversity in thought and bringing in, because remember, most of the canon was 18th and 19th century. There was
Mhm.
very little in the canon that was 20th century. And, even bringing Foucault in only brings you to the 1970s there.
Mhm.
That there was a sense that bringing those into the canon was an important element in updating it, but also decolonializing the
Yeah,
canon, which
yeah, and decentering it from Europe in general, right? Yes,
yeah, and that
probably timely, maybe overdue, and
but not just that. It's a representation of the fact that the world itself was decentering from Europe at that point because
yeah,
Europe had basically had 100 years of serious wars, and maybe that was not the best thing.
yeah.
Um, so
But
so
also the colonialist mentality is deeply baked into that canon. I think that is beyond dispute. But I'm sure there's someone who differ with me on. Let me come at this from a different angle. So there's another phenomenon that's happened also in our lifetime, which is that we moved away from centralized broadcast media towards a diversity of media. Let's say fragmented media across multiple formats, multiple devices, multiple delivery systems, and frankly, multiple publishers. Right. So when we were children, there were three big broadcast networks in the United States, plus public TV, to the extent that we have public TV in the United States, and they all settled on the same set of mythologies. So there was what Noam Chomsky called consensus reality, manufactured consent, right? Uh, and yet we didn't. Our political debate might have debated policy, but we didn't debate the facts.
yeah.
And now what seems to have happened is with the fragmentation of media, you can invent your own facts. And I fear that AI is going to make this even easier to do because you're going to invent, super plausible facts and complex arguments constructed on those sets of highly selective facts. And this strikes me as that we're going to have deepening divisions, deeper misunderstanding. And if you like to stay inside of your solipsistic bubble, you're going to have every opportunity to do so, which means that you'll be detached from whatever we might call consensus reality. Do you see this as something that we should be concerned about? Because this is a
So
topic that keeps coming up again and again.
the interesting thing is we can actually draw a straight line here from the macro social level. So what that means across a civilization to what it means for a single individual, because we're now starting to see at the level of the single individual what they're calling ChatGPT psychosis. All right, and in you think this is funny. It started popping up on threads in Reddit somewhere earlier this year, but as of this past weekend a billionaire funder of OpenAI by the name of Jeff Lewis is displaying all of the symptoms of ChatGPT psychosis now, which is
Oh, so this is a real thing. This isn't a joke.
this is not a joke. This is
Oh,
the
I did
thing.
not know that. Okay.
And there's a combination of both sycophancy and the ability of these systems to sound incredibly reasonable when they're basically feeding you a line that you're then following and reinforcing. So the thing becomes a feedback loop between the LLM and the person. And while that probably wouldn't be true for absolutely everyone, there are clearly people either in the right state of mind or with the right cast of mind that can get caught up into these loops and lose their ability to function well in society, in civilization as a result. Okay, and I'm trying to avoid medicalizing language
It,
there.
it sounds like you're describing the U.S. Congress, but carry on. Don't let me stop you.
Yeah, that's different, but yes. um, and so we so the idea of what you're talking about happening at a societal level, we can already see it. The effects are now pronounced enough that we can start to see it popping up in individuals. And I did some work with I work at the School of Cybernetics at the Australian National University, and I worked with my master's students this year about this. And there are just a lot of questions that we need to ask here. The questions you're asking about truth and the sources of truth, those are old questions, right? They go back to
Hmm.
Socratic philosophy.
Hmm.
But asking them in the context of new systems of information is something that urgently needs to be asked. What basically all the questions you're asking are like, oh my God, we need to basically fire off a generation of PhDs who are going to go work quickly. Like, don't go off and come back in a decade. Go off and come back in 6 months and tell us what you found. Give us the best advice you can on how these things are happening and what we might be able to do to remediate them. It feels like that's the moment we're in now.
I think you're right. So if you were to scan across this entire conversation, it seems what we're pointing to is that this is actually creating more work for human beings, the advent of this technology. I started the conversation saying, should we be worried that AI is going to displace all of us? Now, it might put us in different jobs, but there's clearly a need for some level of human intellect and probably human common sense to govern these systems, at least for the foreseeable future. Mark, let me ask you this question. I want to talk about AGI. So,
Yeah.
general intelligence. Now, there is a school of thought that says AGI is imminent. It's around the corner. It's coming in 2027. And again, we've had these folks on the show from time to time. There's also a counter group that is deeply opposed to this principle. They're like, we can't even define intelligence, let alone what an artificial general intelligence might be. So unless you're going to move the goalposts to conveniently suit whatever technology you developed, you can't really claim a general intelligence. And then the counter is, well, there's a thing called superintelligence, which is simply an AI that can outperform a human on every known benchmark. And actually, we seem to be making progress, steady progress towards such an intelligence. How should we feel about AGI? Is this a pipe dream? Is it imminent? Is it something we should be sweating bullets about and freaking out about? Like, I don't really know how I should react to that right now. I'm curious to hear your perspective.
I mean, so Marvin Minsky, one of the fathers, one of the 10 fathers of artificial intelligence, great quote from him in 1970 saying AGI is 7 years away, right? In 1970. So people have been predicting AGI since we've had artificial intelligence, pretty much.
Okay, so the sun, it's like perpetual dawn. The sun is always rising on AGI, but it never fully rises. Do you expect to see that in your lifetime? Do you expect to see
Well,
a general
okay.
intelligence that rivals a human intelligence or surpasses it?
So, and to come back to your line about benchmarks, I want to point out at the same time in the 1970s, chess playing was considered the benchmark of human intelligence because all of these folks played chess and they just said, oh, you have
Hmm.
to be smart to play chess. It turns out, no,
Yeah.
no, pointedly, no. You don't have to be smart to be, you just have to be fast. Um, and so we move the benchmarks and the goalposts every time we get an algorithm that we know is an algorithm. We can inspect it's like there's an algorithm, that's what it's doing, that does the thing and meets the benchmark. Then we go tick, okay, well, that's not human. So is that it's not so much redefining us, but again, we do not have a workable definition of human intelligence. We have
Hmm.
things we can say about it, but mostly it's just hand waving. What we're doing with all this machine stuff is probably outlining the stuff that actually isn't human intelligence because a machine can do it. So it seems as though human intelligence is the stuff machines don't do.
That's really interesting. So we're making progress on a set of benchmarks, but those benchmarks are increasingly things that humans can't do. So the intelligence we're building, we're directing it towards a set of goals that are by definition things humans cannot do, and yet there are domains that humans remain quite good at: emotional intelligence, creative intelligence, relationship intelligence. Probably some measure of common sense, because God knows that's missing.
And something that we have already been talking about, context, which is
Yeah, tell me about that.
still
You
so
shared a little bit about that
difficult.
last night. I want to hear more. So tell me more about context from your perspective. There's a big buzzword, context engineering, right now. Almost makes you odious how much it's tossed about.
Well, but the thing is, human beings function in context. We are semantically aware, we are situationally aware, we are relationally aware of all sorts of things, and they're all helping us to understand how to navigate a particular situation. Full stop.
Hmm.
Eh, Even putting that to someone who's working on AGI will cause them to just melt down because if I said that's what human intelligence is, and I'm not going to do that because I don't want to define human intelligence. But even if I said that was what human intelligence is, the folks working on AGI would not be able to say, "Oh, we'll have that in 2 years." It's just
Right.
it's not a thing. Can they solve a mathematics problem? Sure, great.
Hmm.
That's fine. So can my calculator. Sure, it's not the same.
Then it's a super
Blah blah.
calculator. We're back at the calculator, which is not a
Yeah,
human, right? Yeah.
right. But if you're talking about being able to take a look at a system, and I don't mean just like, I mean, it could be a little system like a blender, but I mean a big system like the education system, which has been one of the things we've been talking about here, and start to sort of think about it systemically, about its impacts on the people who are forming it, the people who are participating in it, the people who are funding it, the institutions, all of these different things. That kind of global context awareness across all of that is something that seems to be situated in humans, and our culture is kind of an outgrowth of that. Does that mean machines will never be able to do it as well? I don't want to make a statement like that, even on the futurists. Like 50 years, sure, maybe. 5 years, hell no. Right. So
Mm.
more and more of our work is dependent on it. No, 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 wait. Let me pull that back. All of our work is always dependent on context. And the reason people are getting lost in mistruths, right, in fake news or in whatever it is because they're losing sight of the context. If they have context, you have a North Star,
Mm.
right? You have something to navigate by. If you don't have context, and maybe that's one of the big problems is that we're using so much AI, Robert, that we're starting to lose context.
Yeah, it's true. And when humans lose context, like, if you on a daily basis rub elbows with people who politically you don't agree with, you tend not to dehumanize them, right? You tend to have at least some basic human understanding that they're people just like you. You might disagree with them on some topics, but they're human beings. This comes to mind because one of the things about AI is it's a disembodied intelligence. And I'm beginning to believe that what makes humans unique is that our nervous system extends throughout the entire body, and there are aspects of that that are not well understood, like the digestive tract, which has a tremendous
Yeah.
number of nervous connections to the nervous system.
Yeah.
And can you have a disembodied intelligence that is like a human intelligence, and can that disembodied intelligence exceed human context that comes through our body and our physical contact with the real world? And I suspect that that's not the case, right? You made the point last night that experience has to be experienced. You can't automate experience, and you certainly can't, you can't generate experience. And experience comes largely from the fact that we exist in a world, in a body that has interaction with that, right? It's feeling the air temperature on your skin, or wind resistance, or the feeling of your feet on the ground, or the sound of birds or trees or auto traffic or something. And an AI doesn't necessarily have those inputs. So it can't possibly have that experience. It can't replicate that experience. It can't derive then any meaning from experience unless what it's been taught. And that means that it's subject to whatever human being who taught it, or whatever knowledge it can glean from a human written text. So it's secondhand experience, which isn't quite the same thing. So in these respects, I think we're saying that AI is going to be deficient relative to human, even if it exceeds us on certain metrics. But those metrics that we're constructing for it might be deceptive, because those are metrics that, by definition, humans can't achieve. So we might create something we call a super intelligence, but it might still have some major defects that require humans. I'm bringing all this up because, honestly, I have heard this mantra that we're all going to lose our jobs in the next few years many, many times, including a couple of guests in the recent weeks on the show. And I resist it. I think it's implausible. I think it's historically, there is absolutely no basis for it. And actually, right now, with the advent of AI, we are at near full employment. We're at like historical levels of employment. So
Yeah.
it should be showing up in data somewhere if we're going to be displaced on a huge scale. Yes, you seem to want to say something. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm
Well, let me just give you a historical precedent, though.
yeah.
In 1900, about 80% of all labor in America and in Australia was agricultural labor.
Yeah.
All right. By 1950, that was down to 5%. And by 2020, it was around 2%.
Yeah.
So,
And in the
y-
50s, a huge percentage was manufacturing, right? Like humans as machines in factories. I don't think it was ever at quite the same level that that agriculture was, the 90 plus percent. But it was in the high double digits. And today, manufacturing in most industrialized country is down to 15% of the population. So,
unless you're in
humans,
Australia, which is about 6. But
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the same trend line, right? We're seeing that, yeah. Yes, we can get more efficient. And with that, let me just offer this point for the people who are listening, because it sounds like we're making the case that humans are going to get displaced. Job destruction is part of productivity. It's actually core to economic growth. And 4% of jobs are destroyed every single year in a healthy economy. They have to be, because that's the only way to increase productivity, such that there's a pool of profit that you can raise wages with in a non-inflationary way. It's the only way to raise wages. That's the only way to give people more pay, is to destroy jobs and thereby increase productivity. This sounds negative when I put it like that, but that actually has been the story of at least Western civilizations and industrialized nations for 300 years.
Yes.
First we destroyed the labor of dray animals, right? And then it was the labor of, humans that were doing brute force work. We brought machines in to do that. Then we collapsed distance, right, with steam engines and railroads and so forth. And since that time, it's been a steady progression of jobs done by humans that can be replaced by a machine. We're done. That will happen. It's a guarantee. So I guess for those who are listening, if you have a job that can reasonably be done by a machine, which is to say, if you're basically a human calculator or a human who's shuffling paper or processing information, you should think long and hard about your job. Back to the point we made in the beginning of the show, you have to kind of get aware of your own presence, so develop some self-awareness of what you actually do on a day-to-day basis. And if most of what you do is shuffle bits of information back and forth, well, then there's a high likelihood you will be displaced by a machine because the machine's going to do that a lot more efficiently. A
Yep.
friend of mine was talking to me about companies. You think about larger companies. As a company grows in size, where it tends to hire a lot of people is clerks in the middle who just shuffle information. Things like program managers and product marketing managers and people who keep track of the consensus in one group and relay that to another group. They're communicating within the company. Mark, I suspect that a lot of these jobs are going to get automated very soon because AI will do that so much more efficiently. You have a big AI at the center of the company, and you can just query the AI and say, "What is the latest, reading on product management, or what is the latest reading right now on product marketing?" And you don't need a team of people to give you updated reports on that stuff. Uh, what do you think about that prognostication?
I mean, I think all of that is likely, it's probable. One of the things that I became aware of when I started to work sort of more or less full time as a consultant, which is about 15 years ago, I became aware because someone who was running a consultancy and very successful consultancy said, Mark, in the 1990s, a lot of these orgs fired all their middle managers, and the middle management layers that we're talking about replacing with AI, those are also cognition layers. The C suite is focused on, I guess, profits is probably the quick way, right? The middle parts are actually focused on extending the capabilities of the organization. And when you cut those away, the organizations actually become very brittle. They lose their ability to be adaptive. They can be reactive to a certain degree, but only to a certain degree, but they can't be adaptive to new opportunities as easily. And so most of the organizations that we see in the world today, where they do still have that middle layer of information exchange, doesn't have the kind of resilience that you're going to need. And taking those information exchange layers away will probably further deprive them of resilience. And so that's the danger here, right?
Mm.
There's always a trade off. You can get more efficient, but the efficiency has to come at a price. And that price is going to be, I think, probably increasing brittleness.
Okay, so let me see if I can play this back in an example that most people will recognize. Let's suppose you brought in a group of really smart 20 something year olds into a very, very complex system that they were not familiar with and said, start eliminating jobs. Don't ask anyone what they actually do. Just look at a list
You're
of people.
describing Doge.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, so they're cutting away the middle management layers that have institutional memory, that understand the deals that were struck, that understand what we bargained with, in an arms control treaty 20 years ago or something. Those people are gone. The institutional memory is gone with them. And what's left, as you say, is brittle in the sense that it won't be resilient to change. It won't be able to draw upon historical lessons. It won't have experience to counter new experience. So I see your point. I take the point. So are you thinking that we need to be very concerned about job displacement on a mass scale, or do you think this is going to go sector by sector and certain jobs are going to get faded away? But that's always been the case for 300 years.
I think marketing is the first sector where we can see it really clearly, right? I just from the exposure I've had to what's going on in marketing right now, I think it's actually already happening, and so some of that is going to be part and parcel of it. I think manufacturing is one of the last. The trades are absolutely going to be the last, and the caring sector,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
So all those displaced people will take care of older people and people who are physically unwell.
so some of it's going to be we're going to revisit our own set of priorities and we're going to reevaluate the value of labor
Mhm.
appropriately. I think that's really the big story here. It's not is there going to be job destruction, it's how do we reevaluate the actual value of labor in light of what automation is doing.
Right on. Well, on that note, let's bring the show to an end. Do you want to give a forecast? Where can people find out more about you, Mark?
So markpesce.com, markpesce.com will tell you all about me. And the next billion seconds is my own podcast. We'll be doing some more episodes of those in September, all about AI. I think just in terms of a forecast, I think what I want to tell people is, yes, you can expect the AI systems are going to get better. Does that mean that they're smarter? Remember that smarter and better are not exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
And that the kinds of intelligence that do well on a test are not necessarily the kinds of intelligence that do well in the world. And you want to make sure that you're making the right decision about which one of those you're picking.
Right on. Well, thank you, Mark, for joining us in your travels on your way through the U.S. from Australia. It's great to see you again. And
Good to
folks, you've
see
been
you.
listening to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tercek, and my guest has been Mark Pesce. And next week we'll be back. Brett and I will be back with another guest who will tell us about the future. And until then, we'll see you in the future.